Hi, I'm Christy, and I'm here to show you my website Zondervision for my portfolio for UX design. So here's the home page, and it says Extraordinary Vision for Design Implementation. This is a picture of all of the different screens that I did for my UX design portfolio. It's for Vela, and it's a wind, waves, and weather app. The main feature on Vela is for the weather forecast. So you can click here to see the UX design project that I had done for Vela. Now the UX, UI, and graphic design portfolio that I have done is featured here on this page. The first one here is for Vela. The next one is where I did graphic design for the Civic Theater of Allentown, which is in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And I also worked at Perigo, which is in Allegan, Michigan. I worked there as a graphic designer for 8 years. I worked at Civic Theater in Allentown for 2 years. And the UX UI project design that I did for Vela is something that I've done recently. And I did that during the pandemic, which occurred this past year. When I was working at the Civic Theater, it completely shut down and it's still not up and running because of the pandemic. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity for me to go ahead and change careers because I wanted to expand my possible job prospects, and also I wanted to expand my horizons. Instead of doing just graphic design, I wanted to also do digital design as well. So this gives me the ability to not only do graphic design, but to also do apps and websites, and to actually design them so that they would be more user-friendly during the user experience. So looking here at the Vela project, I can click on that. And here's the opening where it tells you a little bit about the app. It's a weather, wind, and waves app. It's a 6-month immersion project that I did, which was completely by myself. And here's a brief project overview of what the project consists of. So first, there's the problem statement, the solution, the business scope, the SMART business objectives. I did research for the competition, and then I did user research. The next step was the problem statement, and then there's goals. I interviewed people, and then I made up user personas. The 11th part were the user flows, and then I did the card sort sitemap. Next, I did usability testing. I did a review. I did a style guide, and I also put in my reflective thoughts of what I thought of after I completed the entire project. Now, the inspiration for Vela was, first there was the problem. The user needed a way to be able to immediately have a weather, wind, and wave app so that they could go out and enjoy water sports. I personally love water sports. I grew up at the beach. I was out there every summer. When I was living in Michigan, that's basically where I lived every single day. And I love being out in the water. I love water sports, and that's what inspired me to do the Vela app. Now, the next step was to look at a solution. So, an app that allows water enthusiasts to plan their activities around accurate water and weather conditions in their desired aquatic destination. There are so many different types of water activities that you can do that it's so vast you can't even begin to name them. But the weather has an influence on all of those water activities, so it's very important to know what the weather forecast is going to be. The next thing that I came up with was the business scope. First, there was the application, and this would be a responsive web application that would include design and engineering. The next would be the marketing plan and how we would present the app and try to market it toward the target audience. The next thing would be the GPS interactive map. Now, this would be a great thing for people who are looking for the location of where they want to participate in their favorite aquatic activity. The next would be a social media blog feed, and this would be something that people could contribute to. For instance, if there was some kind of upcoming event, or if there was some kind of a special event going on, or if they just wanted to shout out and say, hey, this is a great day for going windsurfing, they could do that. So it would give them the opportunity to be able to explain to their friends that it's the perfect condition to do some of their favorite water sports activities. And then the next thing that I looked into was the SMART business objectives. So it goes over specific goals, measurable ways to accomplish those goals, the attainable of how those goals can be achieved, and the relevant for why are the goals feasible. And then would be the time-based for when those goals can be reached. The next step that I did was look at the competition. I looked at a lot of different forecast apps that dealt with forecast, winds, waves, and other water aquatic based activities. Now, the two that I really looked into and I showed for examples for this one were the Surfline Cam, the surf reports, and the forecast through Surfline. And then the next one I looked at was the Wasuki Wind and Waves app. Now, this gave me an idea of how to go about formulating the app, what specific things could be done in the app that I was designing for Vela. And I did this through the SWOT analysis. So I looked for the different opportunities of how the app could be improved. I looked for the strengths of how those apps had really strong aspects to them. I looked for weaknesses of how they could possibly be designed better. And I also looked for threats of how their competitors had an edge up on those apps. The next I looked at was the conceptualization for Vela. I did user research first, and I wanted to really understand the user's needs, behaviors, and motivations. And I did this through different techniques such as observation, task analysis, and other feedback methodologies. Now, I actually interviewed people who would fit the criteria for the target market and asked them a series of questions. I also sent out a survey through SurveyMonkey to find out more feedback as well. The next thing that I looked at was formulating the problem statement, and this helped to really hone in on the scope and what exactly I was going to be designing for the user. The next thing I did was the research goals, what I wanted to understand and what I had learned through the process. The next was the interviews. Now, I did interviews to mostly go along to really find out what people were looking for in a weather app and what types of things would motivate them to use a weather app and what they already were doing in order to figure out the forecast before they went out onto the water. The next thing I did was to form user personas. I did 2 different user personas, and this helps to really make a very human aspect for who we are creating this app for. And it helps to really be able to articulate all of the details of what this Vela app should contain. And then here is a brief overview of what those user personas consisted of. Next was the ideation phase for Vela. I came up with the user flows, and here is one example of how they would go about going through the app in order for a successful completion. And this would be to find out the weather. The next part would be the sitemap card sort. In order to do the sitemap card sort, I had to figure out the architecture of the app and how it would be laid out as far as the home page, the various other pages that would stem off of it, and then the parent folders and then the child folders from those. The next part I did were the prototypes. I did low fidelity, mid fidelity, and high fidelity prototypes. For the low and the mid fidelity prototypes, I did a lot of explanation of what the different buttons would do and what they meant. And then finally, the high fidelity prototypes were pretty much self-explanatory. And then after I had a working prototype that I executed out in Adobe XD, and I also used Photoshop and Illustrator, I did testing for Vela through iteration. Now, after testing 6 different individuals who would replicate the target market for the Vela app, I came up with some really surprising conclusions and really mind opening discoveries through this whole process. It was really a fun and fascinating way to really look at the research and to really figure out what was working, what could be improved, and what else could be added to help just simply make the whole user experience a lot better. And then I did the usability, after doing usability testing, I did more iterations and revamping of the Vela app. Finally, I came to a point where I did a review on how to refine the whole app and then make it even more user-friendly. I looked at Gestalt theories in design, and I also added different elements so that it would be even more user-friendly. And here's some examples of those. The next thing that I did was A/B preference testing. And I gave 2 different screens out to people, and then I emailed them, and the results came back. And I was actually surprised to see that most people liked the first design the best because it had 3 different options besides just 2 options. But I think that if there was 3 options, people would have probably gone with that one. The next was the style guide, and this would be a reference for the developers and for the engineering team to look at so that they knew exactly what would be involved in the app, or if there would be any more features added. Those features could follow along with what's written in the style guide. And then coming here down to the bottom are the reflective thoughts and what I had learned, and then just some questions that I answered about how would I define UX design? Who do you admire, follow, and are inspired by in the industry? And how do you estimate the time of effort a project or task would take? And how do you hand off to engineering? And all of that I explained in the app or in the written document. And then after that, I have the Vela app tutorial, which I recorded and uploaded and put a link on this website so you can watch the video if you're interested. And I also did a prototype that you can click through in the end, and it shows the Adobe XD design that I had done for the prototype. And then you can click on here and it brings you back to the home page. After you do that, you can click on work and you can see what I've done for graphic design. Now, as I said before, I think that graphic design